Understanding some Latin and Greek words do help in remembering or at least guessing the traits of some taxa. However, basing everything on its name could be misleading some of the times. For example, carnivora. That name leads people into thinking all carnivorans are carnivore, but that's simply incorrect. Another example, which would be relevant for this video's topic, is echinodermata. Derma means skin, while echinos means hedgehog. So, intuitively, you would think those animals have prickly skin like a hedgehog. While yes, the echinoids, aka sea urchins, do have prickly skin, many other groups of echinoderms don't really fit that image. When thinking about starfish, many people would think they are smooth. But no, although they don't look prickly, most of them are rough to the touch. They are tubercly. I don't think that's a real word. Bumpy. Yeah, that's the word. There are spiny starfish though. In fact, it's literally the common name of this animal, but it's still not as prickly as echinoids. Hence, not really fitting for the echinoderm name. Which is why, when people take a glance at this animal, most would think these are echinoids. But no, these are starfish, the topic of this video. So, let me bring up the question. What exactly is crown of thorns starfish? I did explicitly mention it like several seconds ago, but yes, crown of thorns starfish are starfish, and that means they are echinoderms. They are classified in the Phalphatida order, which includes some of the largest starfish in terms of mass and bulk. Though most members of this order do still have the generic starfish morphology. You know, 5 arms, like a drawing of a star basically. But the crown of thorns starfish are quite unique, literally. They are classified in their own family, Acanthasteridae, with only one genus, Acanthaster. Acantha means thorn, while aster means star. So, literally, thorny star. Definitely an intuitive name considering how they look. By the way, their common name, crown of thorns starfish, is often abbreviated to COTS in many articles. And you know what? Maybe I'll call them that too. There are currently 4 species which are widely considered valid. Acanthaster planki was the first one to be described, dating back to 1758, which is the year of Linnean taxonomy. Acanthaster mauritiensis was described in 1885. Then Acanthaster brevispinus was described in 1917, and then Acanthaster benziei was described quite recently, or at least was raised as a valid species quite recently, back in 2022. The thing is, there are several others which are sometimes considered their own species in some articles, especially Acanthaster solaris, and probably Acanthaster ellisii. However, in most articles, these two are classified within the Acanthaster planki species. Though, in the relatively recent 2022 publication, Acanthaster solaris is shown to have a distinct enough DNA to be considered its own species. It's based on CO1 gene sequence, which is often used in this kind of analysis, so I think it's convincing enough. So it will probably be considered a valid species in the future. We'll see. They do have some morphological differences, but whether that is enough to raise them into a separate species can be questionable. They are neat regional forms though, so I'll talk about that later anyway. Wait, Toxapex regional form in winds and waves, maybe? Nah, probably too soon for it. Anyway, they can be found throughout the coral reefs of Indo-Pacific Ocean. Of course, when we take a look at specific species, their distribution can be very specific, though some of them have a weird pattern, namely Acanthaster brevispinus, which can be found in the Philippines, Great Barrier Reef of Eastern Australia, and Seychelles, which would be around here, I think. That doesn't make sense. Why would they be so, separated? The easiest explanation would be that they are actually quite widespread, with a relatively continuous distribution, but simply not reported yet. Most specimen of Acanthaster brevispinus is trawled, by the way. So, yeah, they are quite rare. Hence, probably we simply haven't found them yet in other regions. Or, another possibility would be, these are not the same species. The other species pretty much have an intuitive distribution though. Acanthaster mauritiensis can be found in the southern West Indian Ocean. Quite easy to remember because mauritiensis means from Mauritius. Acanthaster benziei can be found in the Red Sea. Then, if the Acanthaster planki group would be divided into their own species, Acanthaster planki itself can be found in northern Indian Ocean. Acanthaster solaris can be found throughout the Pacific. Meanwhile, Acanthaster ellici specifically can be found in eastern Pacific Ocean. If these three are considered a single species, then yeah, they are the most widespread one. And so, what exactly is the difference between them? Some of you might have already noticed it from the images that I've showed, but let's make it a bit clearer, should we? Let's talk about their morphology. But before that, COTS could vary in size, especially during growth. In general though, they can be around 25 to 35 centimeters in diameter. But I've seen some reports of individuals reaching 50 centimeter, maybe even more. Unlike most other starfish, you could clearly see a disc-like body in the middle, which is simply called disc by the way. And also, unlike most other starfish, they got a lot of arms. As they grow and develop, their arms increase in number, and some of them can have 22 arms, maybe even more. They are covered with spines, basically everywhere. Though the body surface itself, the skin, is not rigid unlike most starfish. It's relatively soft and flexible. The dorsal side, aka aboral, has longer and sharper spines, while the ventral side, aka oral, has shorter and blunter spines. Now the differences between the species. Acanthaster brevispinus is the easiest one to identify because their spines are short, especially the ones on top of their disc. Their longest spines barely reach 1 cm long, while the spines of other species can even exceed 3 cm long. Brevispinus literally means short spine, by the way. And now the rest. You could kinda differentiate them by their coloration. Acanthaster planki, the actual planki from the Indian Ocean, are known to have electric blue coloration along their arms. Acanthaster mauritiensis also have a similar pattern, though these streaks are duller, sometimes even grayish. The rest of the species, or at least the other groups, which are Acanthaster solaris, Acanthaster benziei, and Acanthaster ellici, exhibit a different kind of pattern, typically known as the bullseye pattern. This small ring on the middle enclosed in a larger ring around it, which, if you look at them from afar, it kinda looks like an eye. Hence, bullseye pattern. The problem is, they could have some variations, where some look paler, but some could look reddish-orange. Some even don't have the obvious bullseye pattern. Oh, and some even have streaks along their arm, just like Acanthaster mauritiensis and Acanthaster planki. So, not only are they similar to each other in coloration, it's also not exactly consistent. And so, how should we identify the other species if coloration cannot be an indicator? Well, first of all, Acanthaster benziei is known to have a lesser amount of arms. So, if they have a lot of arms, like 15 or more, then it's most likely not benziei. However, the opposite is not exactly applicable. When the other species are still growing, they can have the same number of arms as Acanthaster benziei, so it could be a problem in identifying them. And so, the easiest way is you could simply consider where you found them, because their distribution doesn't exactly overlap. But another way, just to be sure, is to look at their spines. Different species have different spine morphology. I'll show you some images, but if you want to know the detail, I highly suggest reading this article, because you should read the detailed description if you want to properly identify them. Except Acanthaster ellici, that is. Acanthaster ellici is so similar to Acanthaster solaris. One of the remarks which elevated them to their own species back then was the fact that their arms seemed shorter. But a further analysis showed the length of their arms are statistically not significantly different compared to that of Acanthaster solaris, which is why you typically don't see them being considered a distinct taxon in a systematic analysis. But who knows? Maybe we'll discover new stuffs that will indicate otherwise in the future. Anyway, let's talk about their ecology. Earlier, I specifically said they can be found throughout the coral reefs of Indo-Pacific Ocean. And why is that? Well, because they feed on hard corals. By the way, hard corals are a specific group of animals, Scleractinia. COTS themselves do not eat the hard parts of the corals. They feed on the soft body. They will crawl onto a coral, then push their stomach out. The stomach will spread throughout the coral skeleton, seeping in, hence they could digest the soft body. Now, the question is, why do they have such a prickly body? Well, living in coral reefs means you coexist with many predatory fish. Some of them can be quite large. So, yes, the thorns are there to protect them. Their thorns are not only there as a spiky shield, though. COTS are toxic. They contain a substance called asterosaponin in their tissue. When an animal gets pricked by their spines, some of this asterosaponin will seep into the wound. Keep in mind though, they cannot exactly inject said toxin. It's just there in their body basically. But because they are prickly, this substance could seep into the wounds inflicted by their spines. Asterosaponin is hemolytic. Hence, the wound will keep bleeding for a while and it will cause swelling. Humans will also suffer nausea and fever for days, could even be more than a week. Their spines are also quite brittle, so some would break off and become embedded into the wound. Hence, even more problem. Not for the COTS, by the way, because their spines do regenerate. Different species exhibit different toxicity. Acanthaster brevispinus is basically harmless, at least for humans. Acanthaster benziae from the Red Sea exhibit low toxicity, which is why they are active during the night, when the predators are less active. Meanwhile, the ones in the Pacific Ocean are highly toxic. These are where the big predators reside after all, which is why wounds from these COTS are considered serious medical issue for humans. As with many other marine invertebrates, they simply release their gametes to the water, and then fertilization will stochastically happen and become larvae. They don't exactly have specific breeding season, but they typically spawn when the water is around 28 degrees Celsius. These eggs will hatch within a day, by the way, and they will develop quickly. Gastrula will develop into bipinnaria larvae, which can swim with their ciliated bands along their body. By day 5, they will develop into Brachyolaria, with prominent arm stumps. By day 11, their arms had grown relatively long, and they will sink to the bottom. They will fill the substrate with their arms and settle on coralline algae. They will then metamorphose into the typical 5 arms form of a starfish. For several months, they will continue to grow and develop more arms and spines. After around 5 to 7 months, they will attain the maximum number of arms, and then they will move on to feeding on corals. Their gonads will continue to develop until around 4 years old, at least in captivity. And yeah, that's their ecology. It might sound cool, at least unique, but it's not exactly something that will astonish people, right? But actually, crown of thorns starfish are considered a plague by some people. And why is that? Let's talk about it. So, I did emphasize that they feed on hard corals. Some other animals also feed on corals, of course, but the difference is, other animals typically just chip away on the feeding tentacles of corals. Meanwhile, crown of thorns starfish are very thorough on their feeding. They could completely kill the entire colony if nothing is stopping them. But surely something will stop them, right? They do have predators. It's nature after all. Balance will be reached anyway. Surely. Okay, but wait a second. What exactly are their predators? What are the quote unquote big predatory fish that I mentioned earlier? Well, their predators are mostly triggerfish, pufferfish, wrasses, and snappers. Sounds familiar? Well, yes, those are delicacies. People love to eat them, hence overexploitation. And so, while these fish diminish, COTS thrives. Sure, there are other predators that could eat them, like some species of marine snails, but there's not a lot, because COTS defense is simply impenetrable for many animals. Not only that, their proliferation rate is high. Literal mass outbreaks of their population occur in many spots. Hence, many coral reefs died. Have you heard people saying coral reefs are declining significantly, especially back in the day? Well, almost half of those, at least among the ones that happen in the Indo-Pacific Ocean, are caused by COTS outbreak. COTS are still problematic in the Great Barrier Reef, by the way. So yeah, truly painful in multiple ways. There was a period of time when research on COTS are almost always focused on how to eradicate them. I personally am glad that research on their systematics have been surfacing quite recently. There are definitely some stuff that haven't been resolved about them, so who knows what we'll learn in the future. But for now, let's just learn what is known. And that's all for now. Oh, by the way, I think the Wikipedia pages of them were written by the actual researcher that studies them, at some point at least, which is cool of course. Anyway, enjoy your day.